everyone. In today's video, I'm going to be breaking down the differences between 2 strokes and 4 strokes. I'm going to be covering the differences in between how each engine works and what driving style best suits each engine. So if you're buying a new bike and you're not sure whether to get a 2-stroke or a 4-stroke, I hope this video can help you a little bit deciding on which one to buy. So first, let me talk about 4 strokes. This is my dad's old Honda C50. It currently does not work, but I thought I could still use it as an example. And as you can see, we are still working on the bike. So this is a 4-stroke engine, and this is what you'll find in cars and in most motorcycles. So the way that this engine works, and it's the same principle as a 2-stroke, is that there is a piston within a cylinder that's moving up and down, and there's small explosions there that push down the engine, push down the piston, which creates the power to your wheels. So in a 4-stroke, the reason why it's called a 4-stroke is because there's one explosion every stroke, and a stroke is every up or down movement that this piston makes. So a 4-stroke will have compression, which is where it compresses the fuel and air, explosion, which is like the power stroke, and then it has exhaust, which it goes back up and it pushes the exhaust air out, and then it has like the suction, which pulls in the new fresh air and the fuel. So there are 4 strokes per cycle, as I just explained, and this is what you'll find in basically every car. Basically works the exact same in a gasoline or a diesel, and that is also how this engine works. So you might have guessed by the explanation of the 4-stroke how a 2-stroke works. Instead of there being an explosion every 4 strokes, there's an explosion every 2 strokes. So every up and down that it does, there's an explosion, explosion, explosion. It works a little bit differently. It can be a little bit more complicated, but basically the air and fuel mixture in this case, because I do have a carburetor which mixes the fuel and air going in, it goes through the bottom spinning part, which is called the crankshaft, and then back up into the cylinder. And basically, instead of having a different cycle for intake and the exhaust air coming out, the fresh air or the intake air will basically just push out the exhaust air, which does mean it's a little less efficient, mainly because first of all it has double the amount of explosions, and not all of the exhaust air is going to be pushed out, so there's still going to be some exhaust air left in the cylinder area, whilst in a 4-stroke basically all of it will be gone. But however, because there are more explosions, that does mean that they tend to be a little more powerful than 4 strokes, but we will get to that later. So now let's talk about one big difference between these 2 engines, which would be, for example, the power, but also the weight of these engines. One main difference between this engine and the one I'm about to show over there is that this one is water cooled, which is why you can see over here it has a radiator. But as you can see, the engine, if I maybe go to the other side, the engine is not very big. I mean, it is of course a 50cc, so it's going to be small. But if we compare this to the 50cc 4-stroke, it is much bigger, it is much bulkier, which does mean that this is going to be heavier, which is why 2 strokes can be a little more comfortable to ride, especially for beginners, because the bikes with 2-stroke engines are a lot lighter. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit more about 2 strokes and how it might be a bit different to riding a normal 4-stroke. So 2 strokes are more powerful and they're also lighter, which you could say it's better for beginners, but 2 strokes also have what's something called a power band, which any car really, or any engine really does have. But with 2 strokes, they're very, very noticeable. A power band is basically where at a specific RPM, your engine will make the most power. And on a 2-stroke, this is just a lot more power than it normally would. So if you are a beginner and you hop on a 2-stroke, you don't just want to fully rip it, because it's going to maybe not feel super powerful at first, and when that power band kicks in, it can really kick in out of nowhere, and you have to make sure that you are prepared for that. I've been riding 2 strokes for about 2 years now, so I'm used to it, and I absolutely love it. But if you're not used to it, just be cautious, because it is a lot of power that seemingly comes out of nowhere. And they are, like I maybe said before, they are less reliable than two-strokes. But because of the high power band, they are very good for quick bursts of power, which is why they're often used in dirt bikes, like I've said before, because on dirt bike riding you need to accelerate quickly and then you hit a jump or whatever. So you need quick bursts of acceleration, which two-strokes are super, super good at. Riding a two-stroke is basically the exact same as a four-stroke. Same clutch, you have gears, throttle, everything's basically the exact same. The only important difference between riding a two-stroke to a four-stroke, I would say, is engine braking. So two-strokes don't have any engine braking, and if you've ever driven a car or a four-stroke motorcycle, you know that if you, whilst driving, let go of the gas but do not touch the brakes, the engine is going to brake by itself and you're going to slow down quite a bit. And on motorcycles this is especially the case because of the fact that they're so light, which is why engine braking is often used a lot in larger sized four-stroke engines. However, the one I'm showing is a 50cc, which doesn't have it as much, but it's still there. And two-strokes do not have this, and it's actually also bad for the engine because, you know, like I've explained before, the air and fuel mixture goes through the bottom part of the engine, which is the part that spins very, very fast, and that bottom part needs lubrication, right? And you can't just have oil there like you would in a four-stroke, because in a four-stroke you would just have oil there to lubricate it, but you can't have that because then all of that oil would get sucked into the cylinder or up into the combustion chamber, which is why a little bit of oil gets mixed into the fuel and air mixture. Now, my bike automatically does this, so I have the fuel tank here, or well, I can fill it up, and then behind here I have a small oil canister of 1 liter, and it automatically mixes in 2% of oil into the fuel mixture. But some bikes you might have to mix it in yourself, so whenever you refuel the bike you would have to top it off with a little bit of oil, which can get very annoying if you're trying to accurately add a specific amount of oil, which would actually also be best for your bike. But because of this, the fact that that little section needs oil, and it's basically being lubricated by the flow of fuel, right? So the more throttle you give it, the more fuel that part is going to get. But when you're driving and you let go of the throttle and you're basically just coasting without the throttle on, that thing is now spinning very fast, your crankshaft is spinning very fast, but it's not getting any lubrication, or well, not enough, which is why it's actually bad to use engine braking. It's not going to destroy your engine if you do it once or twice, but it's just if you do this all the time, after a year or two, your engine is going to wear out a lot quicker than it should, which is why if you're driving and you want to get into a stop or you want to slow down, I would just let go of the throttle and immediately pull in your clutch, which is going to bring your engine back to idle. It's just a small thing that is going to save your engine from a lot of wear, and although yes, it might wear up your clutch a little bit faster, it's a lot easier to replace a clutch than a crankshaft, which is really the only difference between riding a two-stroke or a four-stroke. One more thing I gotta say about two-strokes, because they're less reliable, the maintenance cost is going to be up, and if you're someone who knows how engine works and has worked on maybe cars or stuff like that, or is good with their hands and good with tools, then getting a two-stroke is not a bad idea at all, because they're fun, and they are going to require a bit more maintenance. But if you can do it all yourself and you find that fun to do, like I do, two-strokes are a great option. Also because most of the two-stroke engines, because there's not that many actually out there. For example, this is a AM6 engine, which is a 50cc engine found in I think about 5 or 6 brands, which is why the aftermarket parts are basically just anywhere to find, and there's so many options, which is obviously a little more engine specific, so you need to see which ones you're going to get. But basically, if you don't mind learning a few things about how an engine works, or you already do, then do not worry about the maintenance of a two-stroke, because it's all rather simple, and if you find it fun, then great, Okay, so four-strokes, they are generally a lot easier to drive because they don't have that aggressive power band of a two-stroke, which is why you can give it full throttle, and it's not like power is going to kick in out of nowhere like it would on the two-stroke. They are also a lot more reliable, and if you want something super reliable, obviously get a 4-stroke, but more specifically I'd probably recommend something Japanese. Furthermore, they also don't burn any oil, well, at least they shouldn't burn any oil. If it does, then there's something wrong with your engine. But they don't intend to burn oil like a 2-stroke does, which does mean that, you know, it's going to be a bit cheaper for to drive, because, well, it's more fuel efficient, which is you're going to have to spend less money on fuel, and you don't have to pay that little extra for oil. They are also a lot more reliable, like I've just explained, so the maintenance cost is going to be a lot less. And overall, these are super good. Just the only thing is that they're a little bit heavier than 2-strokes, and they are also a little bit weaker than 2-strokes. But if you are planning on buying a motorcycle that has a larger capacity than, let's say, 500cc, 4-stroke is basically your only option, because they don't really make 2-strokes larger than 500cc. I think 500cc is the largest 2-stroke ever made from a factory, and even those are very rare, and so there's only a few models that have been made. So buying a 2-stroke is only really useful for smaller engine capacities, and anything else is 4-stroke works great. Another thing about these smaller 4-stroke engines is that they produce a lot less heat than a 2-stroke would, which is why this one is actually air cooled, and the 2-stroke 50cc, they're both the same size. We would need a water cooling system, mainly because the 2-stroke just produces more heat, which does mean that this is a lot simpler. And if you do ever have to do maintenance on your bike and you decide to do it yourself, this is going to be a lot easier, just because you don't have to worry about the whole water system that is in the engine. So to sum everything up between differences between 2-strokes and 4-strokes, and what I would recommend for you depending on your riding style and what you want from a motorcycle. If you just want to go from A to B and you want something reliable, fuel efficient, and cheap, maybe if you're buying a motorcycle because they are cheaper than cars, get a 4-stroke. They're great, they're still very fun, even though they might make a little less power, they're still very good. But then if you want something a little more powerful, and maybe if you're only planning on getting a motorcycle to drive in the weekends, I would highly recommend getting a 2-stroke, especially if you don't mind working on your bike yourself and doing some maintenance things yourself. Then a 2-stroke is going to be better for you, I think. But both bikes obviously are a lot of fun, and just before buying a motorcycle, do a little bit more research on what you want from your bike, and also think beforehand what are you going to use your bike for when deciding between a 2-stroke and a 4-stroke. And of course, if you're getting any kind of motorcycle above 500cc, so if you're going to get a 600cc, 700cc, a liter bike, whatever, 4-stroke is basically the only thing they have. So don't expect buying a 1000cc 2-stroke, because they basically just don't exist unless you build it yourself, which is just crazy if you ever do that. So yeah, it's just do your research beforehand, and obviously the only real difference between driving a 2-stroke and a 4-stroke is the use of engine braking, because on a 4-stroke engine braking is there, and you should probably use it just to reduce the wear on your brakes. And on a 4-stroke, 2-stroke, of course, don't use it because it's bad for the engine. And even if you do use it, it doesn't really do anything at all anyway. But for the rest, 2-strokes and 4-strokes, they basically ride the exact same, and just buy or get whatever you want, because they're both still a lot of fun. That's about everything for today's video. I hope you learned at least something.